I have a background in art and philosophy, and I work at the intersection of art and technology with a group called metaLAB at Harvard. And one of the things that I do with metaLAB is I run these workshops that bring physical materials into dialogue with abstract conceptual problems. I've done workshops on this in a range of topics, from artificial intelligence to natural disasters to disinformation to personal history to many, many other topics. And normally we're in physical space and people are coming from different domains depending on the circumstance or the course. And I bring basically a suitcase filled with strange objects and materials into the environment for this workshop. So things like mirrors and LED lights and pieces of wood and Velcro and all sorts of things that aren't intimidating and are actually fun to play with. And so normally what we do is run a workshop that enables students to conceptualize some challenge or some problem in the form of a question, and then get creative with the physical materials to see what happens. We're online, we're in a pandemic, we're sheltering in place, we're not doing physical workshops together. So I've adapted my methodology for the virtual environment. And since March, I've been running workshops also on a range of topics. And it's been really tremendous and really surprising how simple it can be and how welcome of an opportunity it's been for the students. So I'd like to invite you to try something similar in your own teaching practice. One of the things that's important to me as a scholar and an artist is the value of questions and the importance of questions, especially questions that don't have ready answers or don't have answers at all. We spend so much time thinking about results and conclusions without necessarily focusing on the hardest questions, maybe the most important questions. So I've developed my workshops around a question that each participant generates and then works from. And the same is true for this virtually modified workshop. Both in my art practice and in my teaching, questions themselves are extremely important and central. So for this workshop that I'm sharing with you today, there's a number of steps and I'm going to take you through them. The first is that people need to collect materials from wherever it is they're staying or they're quarantined, because you're not going to be bringing them materials. This can be a really fun part of the process because it can generate some excitement and some curiosity about what's going to happen. And if you send things that are sufficiently abstract, sufficiently cryptic, sufficiently general, people will be able to find them. I haven't had any trouble with that. In fact, people like collecting these materials, not knowing what they're going to be used for. So it's important to keep whatever's going to happen a surprise. Some examples of things I might suggest for your list of materials would be something like the following. Have written on the list, something shiny, something that smells good, something that cuts, something that sticks, something that bends. You get the idea. So you can do that. Doesn't matter where you are, most people can find something to fit at least some of those. People have gotten very creative with what I've seen in the workshops in a way it's actually really great, and it's a different way of engaging them when they're just working from the materials that I bring, because people interpret this list however they might like. One thing I had on a workshop list was something no one else will bring. And in that case, one participant brought her cat, and her cat made it into her final object. So send out this list, and then during the workshop, there's basically 3 steps. The first step is to have everybody write a question. It's good to have a prompt for the question, and it might be something from your specific field, or you could use a prompt that's more general. One prompt that I came up with that I really like and that I invite you to use or adapt however you like is the following. What is a question that you don't know the answer to and that you aren't sure has an answer at all? Once everybody has their question, give about 3 minutes to have people write or draw, it's up to them, on paper, a description of how they might visually envision that question. Or they could try to visualize the answer to that question, but they don't know the answer in this case. But usually keeping it open, so it can be a visual kind of description or articulation of the question, or of the answer or a possible answer. Again, it could be written out just kind of in bulleted lines or drawn. 3 minutes, 3-ish minutes. Just set amounts of time are really useful because constraints are productive even if they're arbitrary. So it doesn't have to be 3 minutes, it could be 5, but whatever it is, make sure it's a fixed amount and enforce it. And then the final part is studio time, where students then take whatever they've drawn from the question they have, take the physical materials they've brought, and have about, 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes to sculpt, create, render, physicalize their visual idea based on their question into some dimensional form. I would encourage it to be fun. I would encourage you to put on some music, make sure people know they can have fun. It's meant to be strange, it's meant to be unexpected, but it really changes the way people think. And it also sometimes gives you an idea for a new metaphor or a new approach. You can see the contours of an old problem in new ways when you actually physically construct it. And if nothing else, it's a nice change from whatever students are normally doing in your class, which I imagine is not this. Then at the end, it's good to give people a couple minutes to give their work a title and maybe write a couple sentences in description, because the objects will be fairly abstract. And then depending on the size of the group and whether time permits, it's great to have a few people or maybe even everybody share out briefly what they made, what they were thinking about, what their question was, and what they came up with. I think you'll be surprised how animated and excited students get when they're kind of going deep in this way, in a way that's time-bound but also kind of intuitive. I ran a pretty related workshop to this one back in April for a Harvard economics course called Economic Justice. In this case, the students wrote questions on the topic of what does economic justice mean in a pandemic? And so they were thinking about what was happening in the world, drawing on things that they had read, and that was the one that the student brought her cat. And what they made was really terrific. One student sculpted, she was working on a question around the efficacy of trickle-down economics. And so she made these paper boxes that she made into this kind of pyramid, and she poured glue over it and sprinkled some black pepper on top, which was meant to be resources, something that smelled good. And turned out that the pepper and the glue didn't trickle down very much at all, just a little bit kind of on one side. It was a little bit more elaborate than that. She also had this ladder thing about how you could possibly jump but also go down. But without getting into too many details, it was really interesting to see this concept that's so familiar to us rendered in three-dimensional form. And some of the issues that seem so obvious when you think about them in the abstract, you can actually physically see in the way it's constructed. Other students worked on things around homelessness and what it means to shelter in place when you don't have a home, questions around environmental justice and how that relates to economic justice and is exacerbated. Questions of environmental concern are exacerbated in some ways during a pandemic. And questions around healthcare and equity broadly. And the students made these really amazing, very strange objects from things that they had found when they were quarantined. I've done other workshops since then, and the results continue to be surprising and the experience is extremely positive. So I hope you'll take some of what I've offered today and adapt it however you like, and bring it into your own virtual classroom as an experiential opportunity to make manifest hard questions with physical objects.